I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Lyons.
Here.
Mrs. Misbach.
Here.
Mr. Kashani. Mr. Kashani. We just had him a second ago. Mr.
He's
Kashani.
muted. He's never muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
I need him to acknowledge. We'll come
I'm
back.
here.
Okay.
I'm here.
There he is.
Thank you. Dr.
I hate
Campbell.
I hate Google Meet, by the way. I like Zoom much better.
I'm
Dr.
here.
Campbell.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. DiTullio.
I'm here.
Dr. Mihalik.
Here.
Dr. Meyer.
Here.
Mr. Moy. Mrs. Swope.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. We'll move to recognition of visitors. I know we had 2 sign-ups. Ms. Williams, do we have any virtual or in real life attendees?
No real life. We just have 2 that Mr. Stobener will be calling that are online.
Hello.
Hello, you are breached in with the Pine Richland School Board at the board meeting. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Dr. Waltrip?
Yes, that's me.
It's Pete Lyons, and I have the entirety of the board and from the administration, Ms. Barbara Williams, our board secretary, Dr. Miller, superintendent, Dr. Pasquinelli, and Dr. Justice, our assistant superintendents, director of finance, director of HR, director of public relations. Just so you know, we're all here. You are in the meeting, and the floor is yours to address any item on our agenda this evening.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Just to introduce myself, my name's Rob Waltrip. I have 3 sons in the district. If you don't know, I've been the team physician for Pine Richland for the last 15 years. The reason I wanted to talk tonight is I wanted to express my concern about the athletic training services, and I think it's a mistake to consider AHN as the provider for the athletic training services. Before going into that, I wanted to just explain to the board what Pine Richland has now. At this point, Pine Richland has a board-certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist. I actually have personally attended every home and away football game for the last several years, other than one where I had surgery myself. The athletic trainers are basically on speed dial with me for all athletes of all sports. They can call me anytime they want with questions. At Tri-Rivers, we have a policy where we get the athletes in quickly for appointments. We typically see them within about 24 hours. They can either see me as a board-certified orthopedic sports specialist, or they can see a hand specialist or a foot and ankle specialist. But basically, we see these athletes as quick as we can. I actually live walking distance from Pine Richland, so if they need me to see an athlete, I can come right over, which I've done on numerous occasions in the past. One thing that's also unique about Tri-Rivers is that we can treat all athletes, and we can treat them all in network. There's no insurance problem. Some of the problems with the Allegheny Health Network contract, first of all, I don't think you'd have the same continuity. It's unlikely that you'd have a single physician that would be basically coordinating everything, and the contract as it is right now doesn't even say that there's a board-certified doctor covering. It also does not specify that there's an orthopedic sports medicine physician, and it only says sports medicine. they could easily substitute a primary care sports provider as opposed to an orthopedic sports provider. The training is very different. Another thing that I think is important to realize is that AHN providers cannot treat UPMC insured athletes in network at UPMC facilities. They don't have access to the Lemieux Center. UPMC has about 1/3 market share in this area. Just as an example, if I see an athlete that has UPMC insurance, I can treat them in my office and I can treat them in network at the hospital where they need to have their surgery if they would happen to need an operation. If an AHN provider sees the same athlete, they're going to have to transfer care to a new provider because they cannot treat in network for those athletes. I don't think that that is optimal for the athletes, and it would definitely be a delay in their care. Overall, I just think it's in the best interest of the Pine Richland athletes to continue the services with UPMC and with Tri-Rivers. As a Tri-Rivers physician, our practice has been covering Pine Richland athletics for 20 years, and we've provided an excellent level of care, and I just don't think that anyone else could match that.
Thank you, Dr. Waltrip. Ms. Williams, do we have
Thank you.
another?
We do. We should have another Dr. Hagan, who Sean will reach out to through phone.
Hello, Dr. Hagan.
Yes, hello. How are you?
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Very
You are
good.
connected
Can you hear
now with the Pine Richland School Board.
me? Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I wanted to just briefly address the bullet point 8.03 on the agenda this evening, athletic trainers contract. Just wanted to make sure there was clarification on our end, UPMC. I'm Vice President of our operations and oversee sports medicine. We were able to look at the contract online this afternoon that was provided by HN, and just had some concerns, wanted to make sure there was clarification on our position on the proposal process, being that there wasn't a formal RPF in place. So we had some discussion on Friday with your administration regarding the proposal and the counter proposal by AHN. And just wanted to clarify that our position was to match the existing contract or existing proposal from AHN and guarantee sponsorship monies moving forward. So I think our concern was when we saw the $29,000 cost savings on the agenda item in comparison, we weren't sure where that was coming from. So we wanted to just make sure there wasn't any confusion or concerns moving forward. We've provided care since 2004 to Pine Richland, both athletic training and physician contract agreements for almost 30 years now. We've been providing services in the area with the largest market share of 16 colleges, 52 high schools, including professional teams, the Steelers and Penguins. I think UPMC has provided great care to Pine Richland. We have #1 ranked hospital in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, and we have leading programs in concussion, ACL research, nutrition, and so forth. We're the only FDA-approved testing that we've used for the students for concussion testing and return to play. And we've provided a lot of other services outside of the contract existing since we've the inception really in 2004. So just want to make sure that those things were addressed by the board in comparing the contracts, because we had a little concern as to looking at some of the differences. We also can provide care for the athletes for all major insurances, including Highmark and UPMC. So I just want to make sure that the board was aware of that as far as providing care to all the athletes moving forward. So our commitment to PR has been strong. We've had shared in the great success that PR has had, and very happy for the school. And we're hoping that we can continue to be a part of that moving forward. We've really appreciated the partnership. And so we just want to make sure that you've gotten the full comprehensive package that we've provided.
Thank you, Dr. Hagan.
Yeah.
This is Pete Lyons, the president of the school board, and your comments have been heard by the entire the board and members, the senior members of the administration are on the line with us. Dr. Waltrip spoke before you.
Okay.
Sean, I'm speaking to our director of technology now. I know you disconnect the caller. They're able to view the meeting online as we continue, however, once you've disconnected the caller.
Yes, using the link that was just emailed out, they can join the stream side of the meeting.
Okay.
We did try and click on that, Sean, and I thank you for sending it. It's telling us that we're not able to connect. I don't know if there's something we needed to upload potentially.
I will call you offline and walk you through to see if there's maybe something that needs adjusted.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
No problem.
I appreciate the time. I want to keep it brief, but we really want to provide any other information that you may need in looking at this decision. And, I think we've had a great relationship for the last, since 2004. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, I think the key was, the concern of what we read on the financial end, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Hagan.
Thank you.
Hopefully, Sean, you can get those guys in. We have a little bit of time before we hit the item that they're most concerned with. You work on that link. Item 1.03 is student, and are there any other visitors? I'm sorry, Ms. Williams.
No, there are not.
Thank you. Item 1.03 is student and staff recognition. Ms. Hawthorne.
Thank you. We're pleased to report some student recognition items for tonight. 7 Pine Richland High School students earned first place awards in the National History Day competition. 2 sophomores were selected as finalists in the International Science and Engineering Fair for their scientific research on Alzheimer's. The high school took 2 first place wins during the TSA Teams Test of Engineering, Aptitude, Mathematics, and Science competition. You can read more about those items via board docs under recognition. Plus, we wanted to mention the district is working on plans to recognize seniors, and more information will be shared with our families, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. Correspondence, Ms. Williams.
No correspondence has been received for this meeting.
Thank you. Item 1.05 is a motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.01 is strategic plan update in our continuity of learning plan. Dr. Miller, do you want to share any comments?
Yeah, briefly, the third paragraph talks about an FAQ document. We've indicated to our families that the FAQ will be posted by the end of the week this week. It is one of those documents that will be a work in progress. So the questions we know, the answers are what we don't always have at this point in time, as some of the public health measures, social distancing requirements, CDC guidelines, Allegheny County direction, those recommendations or expectations by public health officials will continue to emerge and evolve over the course of the weeks and months to come. But to the extent we can provide answers questions, we will post the first draft and then we will update that FAQ document. I won't say in real time, but frequently. I would say, based on the draft we're putting together, seniors in the class of 2020 represents a good portion of the content and questions that are being asked. So there are logistical questions, and then there are questions just based upon care and compassion and desires and needs for seniors. It's an emotional and significant part of the life of a student when they reach graduation from high school. And we care deeply about our families and our students in their years here, whether that's 1 year or that's 13 years as they've started in kindergarten. We have care for them and for their families, and we want this to be the best. Generally speaking, we've received very positive feedback. There are some who are desiring some of the social elements that normally exist at the end of a year. There are some districts who have communicated social decisions that provide hope to families. At the same time, there's a difference between realistic planning and what I would call the possibility of false hope. And the reality of COVID-19 and the progression of the disease is that some social events do not fit with public health measures for the foreseeable future. We are certainly monitoring those, and specifically around seniors and around high school age students. Mrs. Bowman's working with Dr. Pasquinelli, working with students, working with staff members, talking with parents. A whole lot of things are happening there around that, and we will continue to monitor that. But the public health is the number one key driver of all the decisions that we make. And in the area of our most significant concern is really thinking about how to make commencement happen in the best possible way for families, and to be as creative as possible in line with those public health guidelines. So we're spending a lot of time on a lot of things. Mrs. Bowman's communicated frequently, both in writing and in podcast messages and on the phone and with students and staff and so forth. But we will continue to monitor things, and we will continue to update the FAQ. Mike, is there anything you wanted to add, or is that summarize it?
I'd just say, in terms of, like Brian said, graduation, obviously everyone desires to have a traditional graduation. We have communicated that, June 5th, or if we had a rain date, we've said June 6th, is our graduation date. We feel an obligation to have graduation on June 5th. If it's a virtual graduation, then we will do that, and we'll do it to the best of our ability, and we'll make it high quality. The reality is that a couple days after graduation, kids have other plans and things happen. So we feel the right thing to do is to offer that graduation on June 5th. We've then communicated that we're looking at other dates later in the summer to, in addition to the June 5th graduation, we would have as close as we can to a traditional graduation experience for our kids. So we have communicated that. Sometimes I think either messages are missed and then information is shared. But again, our intentions are to make it as positive for our seniors as possible. In terms of celebrating our seniors, we have a number of different activities that we're working on. We're going to share that through the FAQ that's coming out this week. Again, we're looking at, what we would consider most appropriate, reasonable, but something that I think will excite our kids and our community, and we'll share that. So Mrs. Bowman has been working with groups of students, with teacher leaders, with PTO. So there's a number of groups that are involved in planning these things out. So more to come in the FAQ. Again, I think community and students will be pleased with it, and like Brian said, also we'll continue to update that FAQ as more information becomes available.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. I know throughout this, the administration's been clear in articulating a set of values behind their decision making, placing safety and security for staff and our students at the forefront in that. And it sounds like that continues as it should. I know it's difficult for such a critical time in their lives to miss out on some of these events, and there's not much we can do with the information we have right now. So I appreciate and can hear the concern that's voiced from the community and from the administration. I know we share it as a board. Wishing it weren't so, though, doesn't really help us provide clarity for that. So I'm glad you're continuing to look at it and look at creative solutions to this, but compromising on those issues of safety and security wouldn't be the answer we'd want to see.
Yeah, and I'll just to reiterate, Allegheny County Health Department has been and will continue to be a resource for us in the past and in the future. And Dr. Mertz and her team provide feedback to us so that when decisions are made, they're based upon feedback and guidance from public health experts in this region, not based on I think, I feel.
Thank you. Any other thoughts to share from the board or administration?
Yeah, I had a question, and Don, you may be able to answer this, or maybe somebody in the administration already knows the answer. But based on what Governor Wolf announced, and I don't have the exact verbiage in front of me, but basically what he said is the schools are to remain closed until the end of the academic year. If I understand correctly, the academic year is June 30th. And if that's the case, then we cannot have an in-person commencement before that, or is it the end of Pine Richland's academic year? It seems gray, at least on what I've read. I don't know if there's any exact thing that's been stated anywhere. I just haven't seen it. So that's a question that I raise, because my goal would be to push for an in-person commencement if it is deemed safe. But we've also got this regulation sitting out there that says to the end of the academic year.
So this is Brian. I'll save the attorney speak. No offense meant, Dawn. But the way that we've interpreted that language is there's 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, all with different academic calendars. And everything in the spirit of all communication that's come out to public school districts is you can retain your approved academic calendar in the delivery of services, and they've waived any of the other requirements that would have caused the school year to be extended deeper into June. So what I interpret, and I feel confident in that interpretation, he was merely addressing the fact that we have 500 different school districts and not a particular date on the calendar, like June 30.
All right. Thank you. I'll just voice again that my desire would be that if we could do it,
so
it would end to a bad year. Let's put it that way.
So let me say this, and again, we've said the same thing. It is our desire to have a traditional, physically attended graduation if we can safely and appropriately do so with public health guidelines. That's where we're starting in thinking about how can we manage that. So for example, what would it look like to have 375 chairs all 6 feet away from each other on the stadium turf? What might it look like to have a limited number of physical attendees per graduate wearing masks to the ceremony? It can't maybe be everything, but to the extent that we can put reasonable things in place and then run those past public health. That's what I mean by public health's the key driver, but we will be creative. So I want to be abundantly clear that we share that to the extent that we can do things to maintain public health, CDC, and other guidance that we're responsible for. So we're with you, Mr. DiTullio. We cannot promise something we cannot deliver. And so while some districts seem comfortable sharing wishes and hopes could lead to false hope, could lead to bitter disappointment when the reality of a global pandemic comes to roost. You know, there are large event gatherings that public health officials are concerned with whether or not those will exist in the fall of 20, let alone in the summer. So that's the reality. We are with you, and we will do everything in our power to be creative and thoughtful, and we'll run it past all the appropriate people because we share that goal. I just don't know if we can make the goal a reality, but we'll do everything we can to try.
I could just add, again, one more practical example of our desire to do that. You know, we had some staff members today at the stadium basically measuring, you know, two people sitting next to each other and then 6 feet. So I mean, we're going to that extent of looking at all possible options to provide our kids with a traditional experience. So we're looking at it, we are investigating, and we'll be prepared for all ends of the continuum.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Moving into item 3.01, which is our consent agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed below, item 6.01, 7.01, 7.02, 8.01, 8.02, 901, and 902.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any board member would like a item removed from the consent agenda to be discussed individually? Any discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Kashani, Finance.
Item 4.01 is a motion to approve the financial reports dated February 29th, 2020, and the accounts payable dated April 20th, 2020, in the amount of $548,076.63, and paid accounts for March, April in the amount of $9,234,195.79 as listed.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Motion carries.
Item 4.02 is a motion to approve the budget transfers in the amount of $155,764 as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Motion carries.
Item 4.03 is a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the incurring of non-electoral debt to refund all or a portion of the school district's general obligation bonds, Series 2010, and refunding Series A of 2015, as presented to the board.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Ms. Kirk, I had a question. I had made the comment to the board that if you could confirm that the resolution herein authorizes the refunding, but doesn't express an opinion on the various refunding options that were discussed at the last finance meeting. That's true, correct?
Yes, that's correct. This basically just provides the savings parameters, and then we still have the option to decide how we want to capture those savings.
And when do you foresee the board expressing their opinion, do you need more feedback tonight or looking at the meeting schedule going forward?
You know what, following our approval this evening, I will reach out to Tony and Cliff and see if they need any additional direction prior to May 11th. I believe that essentially this resolution will allow them to start the paperwork. We can then get on the schedule with S&P, start to do all of the official documentation that we have to do on our end. So I don't necessarily know if they're going to need any feedback from the board prior to your next meeting. I will keep you posted.
This is Brian. I would add, we do have one more meeting next Monday on the calendar. So if Mr. Messitti indicates that that discussion would need to occur, then we could get that feedback to the board in advance of next Monday, the 27th.
The only other thing I would ask, since we're getting updates from Tony periodically between now and then, and I do like the option of having some flexibility, but it would be nice to see a lesser amount. I think that Dr. Miller, you expressed maybe something of a lesser amount as an option would be preferable. So maybe advise him that we like to still have that option. That would be a shortened step down, but maybe not as much cash savings in the next 3 or so years.
Sure, absolutely.
So just to be clear, for the modeling purposes, a couple 100,000 instead of 400,000 as an example.
Yes, I know we were
Correct.
talking around the 250 range.
Okay.
So yes, I will definitely share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? We'll take a vote on the motion to refund. All those in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.
Academic achievement, Dr. Meyer.
This is just a reminder of Academic Achievement Committee, which will be held on May 16th, is the end of the program review for music. It moved on me. Music, English language arts, and library will be presented. This is an off night and no school board will follow the committee meeting.
Thank you, Carla. Buildings and grounds, Mr. DiTullio, I believe we covered 6.01 in the consent agenda.
Yep. Okay. Item 6.02 is a motion to authorize the advertisements for bids for trash and recycling hauling services.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Do I have any discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, if that's all right. The questions all come from past work that I have in working with businesses all over and academic institutions all over the Pittsburgh area in initiating sustainability programs. And one of the things that I know that happens is when you renegotiate a waste contract, that really is the point at which, if you are going to make major decisions about reducing overall waste, increasing recycling of certain materials, initiating composting programs, that's the time to do it, because the way a lot of waste contracts work, you don't pay for, you don't get any incentives to reduce unless you have that negotiated in the contract. And I know that the administration was looking at this, and so the question is, you know, what does it look like in terms of this bid that allows for incentives for whoever bids on this, incentives for the district to increase waste reduction or recycling rates?
Sure. So just to jump in, I can at least say that yes, since about January, Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Gruber and I have been looking at this. We did receive some proposals from the PA Resources Council in trying to look at some different options. One of the options that we looked at was a waste and recycling audit that would reduce the volume of waste, or at least attempt to reduce the volume of waste within our buildings. There were a variety of different options that we looked at. One of them was trying to, combine all of the waste into one location, which we don't have the manpower or the equipment to do. We did also look at the cost of the recycling audit. And part of that, in speaking with their staff, was trying to kind of put into this bid some requirements for the contractors that we would require of them. Where it gets a little tricky, though, is that this trash recycling bid is not something that we can treat as a services agreement. So we cannot issue it as a request for proposal and then evaluate it based on a rubric. We actually do have to bid it based on competitive bid and then select the lowest cost. So that being said, one of the things that we looked at was trying to reduce our waste internally, and what were the things that we could do that were not on the contractor to try and reduce that volume. So I know that Mr. Gruber and both Ms. Bucknam were also looking at different ways of trying to reduce like our plastic. Diane was looking at different options such as like paper cartons versus the plastic milk jugs that we've used for the past few years. So we have looked at some certain things like that. In terms of the actual bid documentation, the bid that you have in front of you for approval is kind of a conventional bid for municipal school districts. It fits within the school code. It does not have anything over and above that would be kind of incentivizing a company to do anything different. Now, that being said, I did reach out to our solicitor, Mr. Palmer, so I know he is on this call. We did talk about what that would look like if we were to make changes to this bid, and how realistic would it be to make those changes quickly in order to stay within the time frame that's listed on your board agenda. That being said, we don't necessarily think that that would be logical. So if we were to move in a different direction and we were to look at putting in some type of incentive for reducing the overall amount of waste, or including something along the lines of composting and something headed in that direction, it would probably make sense to remove it from the agenda tonight. But the only time frame that we would be looking at would then be an approval in June, and then delaying the approval of the vendor until July. Now, that being said, our current agreement does go until August 31st. So we could do that. We would be kind of up against the time frame, just because we would be, usually what happens is we end up with a change in vendor. So the current vendor would have to pull out their, their receptacles, and then we would have to work with the new vendor to get theirs in before the end of August. So it can be done. But again, a lot of that is going to be some legal work behind the scenes in terms of Gehring, Ritter, and Beam as to what we would be permitted to do and include in these bid documents that would be still within school code and competitive bid guidelines.
So
Thank you.
just it sounds like then it's somewhat of a headache to redo it. We're really at a moment though to decide whether or not incentivizing the reductions are worth that extra headache or not. Is that a fair way of characterizing it?
I think so. I think it just involves some time and investigation, probably through Gehring, Ritter, and Beam, as to what we were permitted to do. There would probably have to be some work between Mr. Zimmerman on our staff and Ms. Doherty at Gehring, Ritter, and Beam to try and figure out how we could include different language but stay within school code, try and remain within the limits of competitive bidding, and one of the things we would have to look at is trying to put in these types of things as an alternate. Because if we put them in as a total requirement and the cost comes in excessively high, we would want to make sure that we still have something to fall back on so that we are not locking ourselves into a much higher cost. So it would probably be some type of base bid, some type of alternates as to what those incentives would look like. And again, I don't necessarily know how that would look, but we would likely need longer than a couple of weeks to figure out how to do that.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think, you know, given my background and interests, I would not want to see an opportunity like this to pass us up, because then we're looking at a couple of years until we would have incentives to make change. But
Is this something that could be addressed if we tabled the item this evening?
So we did talk about that. We talked about possibly tabling it, but in order to have it approved by May 11th, logistically, Gehring, Rutter, and Beam would still have to have a majority of their work done by next Friday. So I don't know if that is achievable. I think that it would probably be in our best interest and their best interest to then, if we tabled it, it would actually then have to be until June.
Yeah, Dana, this is Dawn. I spoke with Jamie Doherty after you and I spoke here today, and she indicated really just what you said. That was a nice summary of it. She would put this as a front burner and devote all her attention to it. It really would depend on how much time you had as well and how much the two of you could craft together, because the documents would have to be written extremely carefully to make sure that we comply with the public bidding requirements. So, you know, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks is probably more likely with the back and forth that would go on.
So, not to sign up Mr. Zimmerman for a project. However, we do have 2 weeks of nonstop accounts payable financial information system configuration. So sadly, I am involved in that for the next 2 weeks, but I could easily reach out to Mr. Zimmerman to see if he and Jamie could work on this project together.
When's our current contract up?
It expires August 31st.
Okay.
But, yes, in the time that I have been here, typically we almost always have a change in contractor. So we would not want to delay this any further past the July board meeting. So in order to meet that deadline, we would likely have to have this authorized by the planning meeting in June. And then, hold on, I sketched out a time frame. So then we would likely then have 3 weeks of a bid timeline. We would have to ensure that we still have 10 days until a bid opening in order to make the July 13th board agenda meeting. So we could do it. It's going to be tight, but we could do it. We cannot go past the July meeting now.
Is it possible to issue an extension on the current contract for 1, 2, 3 months if we wanted to pursue this project and not run into timetable issues with getting the bid out?
So we actually had floated that idea back in January, and it's not necessarily something that is typically done in this sector. So I tend to believe that it would be in our best interest so as not to have any bid protest moving forward, to try and stick with actually awarding a bid as opposed to an extension.
And guys, Mark here, it sounds like to me that Dana is concerned about this. I know she's attempting to be open to this, but and forgive me, I struggle to see what we gain by doing this.
I guess it comes down to just the cost benefits, and cost meaning financial cost and or soft cost of sustainability versus procedural is really where we're at.
Well, right. And I mean, so we're debating whether or not to include in the RFP more definition around sustainability to weigh those options. And so I think if we're really going to seriously consider this, we should probably take a vote on if we have majority that thinks that that's important. If we're going to risk a tight timeline here to make this happen at the end of August.
And certainly a vote to table would sort of do that, but I might frame it differently. So the concerns or suggestion and guidance to take some of these elements into account should have been made, and I think was made much earlier in the process.
That's correct. We've actually been on this topic since shortly after the new year.
And so with its due consideration, the advertisements have taken that into account and are as you and legal would have them be with those considerations, which may not be at the highest level. There were realistic constraints on what we could do, which I think was what you outlined at the top.
Yes, I think the difficulty is that we have different constraints versus, companies, corporations. So that's one of the things that we had looked at back in January. And again, Clayton and Jeff and I had multiple meetings, conference calls, again, since January with the PA Resources Council. We've looked into everything from trash and recycling audits to different recommendations. Then we decided to try and focus some of our work internally. So I know Mr. Gruber has been doing a fantastic job in trying to align some of our chemicals to be more eco-friendly. He's been looking at not only the recycling and trash containers that we've used in the past, whether that be within the buildings or even externally for the pickups. So we've kind of tried approaching this from every possible direction.
So Matt, just talk about some of the things that you brought up. Would it, to not lose the bid process timelines, but also to capture the sustainability, would it not, I mean, we can still pursue sustainability as an organization with or without it tied to a contract. So would having an update put together about what Mr. Gruber, Mr. Zimmerman are working on as far as sustainability, and have that updated, once every couple months at least, and maybe make that kind of a focus. We could even make it a board goal if that's something that everyone would agree on, or kind of watch it that way versus necessarily tying it into a contract. Would that be something that would hit the points that you're talking about, Matt, or would you rather pursue this? Because I'm in lieu of going with, let's keep the timeline as is, let's not table, and let's move forward with what the administration has done, but at the same time recognize that some of these projects are already being worked on. We just need to capture them, but they don't necessarily need to be tied into a contract.
So here's what I've seen over the years, and that is certainly any entity can pursue the desire to compost, the desire to collect recyclables. At the end of the day, though, it comes down to two things. Someone's got to haul that stuff away and get it in the right stream, and someone has to have a financial incentive to do those things. And if the contract is not set up to make that a benefit to everyone who's participating, then it always becomes underperforming. It might be a nice feel-good initiative that might collect a few plastic bottles that may or may not end up in a landfill anyhow. You know, people will feel good about doing something for some short period of time, but it ultimately will not actually result in change. The way these waste contracts are structured is that they haul by the visit, by the bin, not by the mass or the volume of waste that's in them, unless you specify that's what you want. And so as a result, even if you measure change, that change may not make any difference when it actually comes time to haul that stuff away and go somewhere. So the best performers in this actually end up measuring the mass and volume of their different types of waste, and they structure a contract that incentivizes them for reducing landfill waste and increasing volume in recyclable content and compostable content that is hauled away. It's never easy. Why this feels so painful and difficult is intentional on the part of waste haulers. They're very strong lobby in the legislature, and they do know that this is a trap that's very difficult to get out of. And so I just bring it up for those reasons. I know it's inconvenient. I don't want to, cause us to stall or risk our contract, but I do think it's worth looking at this head on and knowing what we're talking about, that, after this contract is signed, we may be down the same path 2 or 3 years from now. Anyhow, that's just my experience in this, which is the only reason why I'm speaking up about it.
Mr. Lyons, just for a second. Dana, and I'm not sure you would even know this. Is it possible to do a 1-year term with this language? Is there a requirement on the length of the term? Could we do a 1-year term with existing language of this package and then provide the space to look at it differently? Or would that impact, what are the risks of that?
I'll be totally honest, I actually do not know. I do know that we talked about some of the risks of extending with our current contractor, and that there were risks involved with that we did not want to go down. But to do a 1-year bid.
I'm talking about a bid for 1 year.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Yeah, Brian, I believe we could do a 1-year bid, advertising it in accordance with normal procedures, et cetera. I don't know what kind of response that might generate.
And that being said, though, too, we would still have to then continuously plan with Jamie and Mr. Zimmerman to come up with what our next plan would be for the incentives and changing what that bid would look like moving forward. So we wouldn't, we definitely wouldn't stop the momentum.
No, I understand. I was just trying to find a way to minimize, to move forward with this timeline and potentially provide the space to think differently, if that can even be done effectively.
Don, within, I mean, so there was some, from my perspective, questions were asked at the appropriate time early in the process, and we ran up against, as Dr. Mihalik points out, there are, like it or not, there are certain constraints under school code that they were left vague to me, that said, well, there's only so much we can do, right? And that's not going to change whether we table, defer, do a 1-year contract. And by the way, a one-year contract, talking about that changeover, obviously you're replacing all the containers, et cetera. I can't imagine you're going to get your lowest cost bids from a one-year contract either. But it won't change the unchangeable. I don't know if there's any more concrete examples of what, the sort of flexibility we might in a perfect world have incorporated that we simply can't, and that we would still face a month or a year from now, in all likelihood.
Yeah, I mean, if perhaps you could build a rubric that would satisfy PA competitive bidding requirements, but that's going to take some effort and analysis that I don't think has been done yet. The composting programs, I don't think that's been discussed. So you'd have to flesh out exactly what those ideas are and what exactly you're looking for, and then carefully craft that so it fits within the Pennsylvania bidding requirements. And that, I don't mean to sound a little vague there, Peter, but it's going to take some discussion and time as to exactly what kind of rubric and incentives you're examining and looking for. And then can we put that in format that would work in a competitive bidding environment? Which
would mean it to be as objective and clear in the criteria that we're measuring, and all of that would be measured from a place of, well, we're not doing it now, but we're going to measure you against what you should be doing or what you say you're going to do.
Right, and that we're not writing bids that only one or two companies could meet. That it's still a level playing field, and we're not getting into proprietary bids and things like that.
So a suggestion is that we move ahead as outlined for this current contract. I think that we, during a Buildings and Grounds committee meeting, bring this up and possibly, Matt, with your help and your experience in this, put together basically a scope, if you will, to add something to the strategic plan. Because one thing I can tell you, we're not like other organizations. And if it's the thought of the entire board that, hey, this is going to be a strategic initiative, and we put that to the administration, it will get done. Now, will it get done tomorrow? No. But if you look at what the administration's done with everything that they've built and put into the strategic plan, it's gotten accomplished. And again, if the whole board thinks that a strategic plan for the sustainability is the way to go, it may be that the next contract time is when it's ready. But I think in everything that's been discussed, and instead of trying to fit the square peg through the round hole now, we get that peg to the right size and right shape for the contract when it hits the next time. We get it in the plan. And with Dr. Miller and the SLT leading the way, I'm confident that we'll get somewhere that we're all happy with. Maybe not as fast as we want, but faster than we would with a lot of other administrations. Let's put it that way. My opinion, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I would say, just for everybody's clarity, we do have sustainability and environmental design already as a long-term goal in the strategic plan. So we are already implementing energy reduction, strategic activities. We're doing a number of things. So what we do on an annual basis is we look at the one-year goals, and we want to become very specific about what we accomplish in 2021, 21, 22, et cetera. So that's space, Greg, for what you're talking about. It's right there already in the plan. It's just a matter of doing our annual review and thinking about what specifically do we want to accomplish next year, the next year, and so on.
And just to partner on that too, again, I know that Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Gruber have been very involved in this. So it is something that they do take very seriously. Now, that being said, whether we do this full legal analysis of what we're permitted to do now, or we do it in 2.5 years, there's still going to be a legal cost associated with having attorneys try and review what are we able to do, and then what are we able to enter into a bid or a draft agreement that we would try to require these contractors to comply with. What are we able to actually do, and what are we not able to do? Because we do have to keep in mind that this is not a proposal and that this is a bid. So I think either way, it's going to involve legal costs, legal analysis. It's just a matter of, are we doing it now or are we doing it in 2 years is really where we're at.
Any other comments?
I just want to thank the board for the time you spent on this. This is, by the way, what everyone's feeling right now. This is what it feels like to work on the front lines of sustainability. It's
Well,
why it
hopefully
takes,
we do. Go ahead, Matt.
why it takes long for things to change in the right direction.
I hope that if we do hit obstacles through this contract, we can learn from them. And here's the bad news, that 4 years will be around much quicker than you think. I can tell you from experience. So, all right, Ms. Williams, I believe we've had a second on this motion already.
We have.
All right, any other comments before we vote? Please, all those in favor say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Opposed or abstentions?
I will abstain.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. Motion carries. Dr. Campbell, we blanked you, I believe, with our consent agenda.
Yep.
So we'll move right to Dr. Mihalik. If you could begin with item 8.03, Dr. Mihalik.
Thank you. Item 8.03 is a motion to accept a 5-year sports medicine contract with Allegheny Health Network starting July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2025. The agreement will provide 4 trainers during each of the 3 athletic seasons, fall, winter, and spring, along with other sports medicine resources. The cost to the district is $40,500 in year 1, with a 2% increase in each year.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
If you'd like, I could walk you through a little bit of the process that we followed for this.
That would be great, Dr. Pasquinelli. Yes, please.
So a little insight. So obviously when contract was coming to an end for UPMC in June of this year, we asked Mr. Simmons, our director of athletics, to reach out to both UPMC and AHN to gather proposals from them. So he's been working over a period of time with both companies. As he went through this, we asked him, Mr. Simmons, to do basically a side-by-side comparison between the 2 companies. UPMC obviously having a leg up, being with us since 2004, we wanted to just see what both organizations would offer. So as the proposals started to come in and Mr. Simmons was reviewing, looking at the side-by-side, there were many similarities between those 2 organizations. And reaching out to other school districts that have used or are using AHN, they were very pleased and have been pleased with their services. So looking then at bottom line costs, there was a significant difference between the initial proposal by UPMC and AHN. So knowing that and knowing the history that we had with UPMC, Mr. Simmons went back to them, shared specifics regarding the AHN proposal, and asked for any modifications to their proposal. UPMC did make some modifications, still not at the same level as AHN, but did make some modifications to their proposal. Following that proposal that came in, Mr. Simmons, Mr. Kenyon, and I not met face-to-face, but did video or teleconferences with representatives from both AHN and UPMC to get some additional insight and hear their perspectives. And again, pleased with a lot of the things we heard from both of those organizations. So after those final proposals were reviewed, again, still the bottom line cost for AHN was less than UPMC. We moved forward with our recommendation and provided a summary to SLT and provided a summary that we would share with the board and community. So this last Thursday was our SLT meeting. That is when we shared our final recommendation with our senior leadership team members. Following that conversation, I asked Mr. Simmons to reach to both companies just out of respect for those companies and the time that they had put in to working with us to let them know what our recommendation was going to be. That was Thursday of last week. Friday of last week, Mr. Kenny and I received an email from UPMC and asked to discuss their proposal. I did reach out to a representative from UPMC Friday afternoon. At that time, I was told that they were willing to modify their proposal and match AHN. I explained to them I just did not feel comfortable stepping out of the process at that point of everything that we've gone through with both companies. Appreciated everything that they've done, but just let them know we plan to move forward with our recommendation. In looking at some of the language in the proposal in terms of the physician, the language in the AHN proposal states that the team physician is a licensed medical doctor who specializes in sports medicine. In talking with the representatives from AHN, they did share that they're affiliated with the Pirates, so they're working with athletic organizations. They stay very closely connected to their athletic trainers, so we have 4 trainers over the course of every season. That's an increase from where we were. We were at 4-3-4, so we'll be moving to 4-4-4. That's each of the 3 seasons: fall, winter, and spring. And they have some technology that they use that keeps the trainers connected to the team physicians and the trainers and families connected on a regular basis. So we were confident and comfortable with the recommendation for AHN.
Thank you, Dr. Pate. Are there any other questions or comments?
Has there been any service issues with the current supplier in UPMC? Has there been any issues?
No.
So, and I understand the process, but this to me is very different than, say, trash hauling when we're talking about care of students. So typically when you make a change, there's always a cost of changing something, right? And that cost needs to be justified. And I'm not talking cost as in dollars and cents, but on overall cost. I mean, when you make a change, there has to be something that you're looking for, i.e. better service, better price, or a complete change in service. So we're not unhappy with the service. They're going to meet the price, but we're going to have a cost to change. I guess from my standpoint, I don't understand it when it's a healthcare provider. The last person that I want to change is a healthcare provider that I am comfortable and confident with. And I've dealt with both AHN and UPMC, and personally, I wish they'd grow up and stop fighting. But the fact that I know, unless there's something specifically different about this contract than anything else AHN and UPMC do, we will not have continuity of providers. And if we're comfortable with the providers right now, and we're talking about the health and welfare of students and student athletes, even if the savings was $29,000, I don't know if I personally could justify it unless there was a, hey, we're not happy with this care. There's something going on. So and it would be either way, whether UPMC or AHN was our current supplier. I don't see the need to change, particularly when there's no cost advantage, but when there's no service issues going on right now that have been identified. Just my 2 cents. So I won't vote for it for those reasons.
Yeah, so my 2 cents is the fact that I'm very proud to have AGH as a partner in our community, actually paying taxes on a facility that that we benefit from as well. They're building a new hospital. I actually find offensive that there's a suggestion that the quality of care would actually degrade by switching to AGH. I think this is an example of their squabbles, actually, Greg. The fact that we're even talking about this right now is only a fact of that they still are fighting, even though there's some type of truce. So we followed our process that we typically follow whenever we evaluate our vendors. It was objective, and I actually think we set a dangerous precedent by allowing UPMC simply to match AGH's price. What signal are we sending to AGH and any other vendor that would want to deal with Pine Richland if we allow this? But I appreciate the explanation that Dr. P gave on the objective process that was followed. And I'm proud to have AGH as a partner. So I think this switch is welcome. I was part of the football coaching staff whenever we started this contract with UPMC a long time ago. And they've been a good partner. But I also think that given the amount of due diligence that was done in this process, I'm satisfied with. So thank you for that, Dr. P. And so I support this change.
This is Brian. I would add one thing, and again, being very clear, not a criticism, just a fact. We have had changeover in our athletic training staff within the last year or so. Correct, Dr. P? So there was a time period when we had a long history of consistency with the actual athletic trainers who are on site. That has really changed over. So we do not have that same historical period of time in terms of really understanding or being a part of the culture for a period of time. Is that correct, Mike? Yeah.
So this is Chris, and I really don't need to repeat what Mark said, but I do agree with Mark and that there was a process that was gone through with the administration, and I do respect that process. And so I would stick with the administration. I really don't think that the health of our students would suffer. I think that the physicians, when they see the individual, it may or may not be who continues with their care, but it's the athletic trainers as well who are the ones who have probably more daily contact with our students, and that continuity is important there with them. But I do respect the process that the administration goes through, and I do trust them and their recommendation.
Yeah, this is Peter. This is a tough one because I can't help but feel, I certainly, Greg, very much agree that there's not a service level problem, but I think there were issues in sort of renegotiating this renewal. And for instance, it's hypothetical, so it's not really necessary to answer, but if UPMC had come through and been completely competitive, apples to apples, with AHN all along, I don't think we'd be in this position. And so it's awkward. And that I think goes to that process, Chris and Mark, that when you sort of get to this place, that if you had been here 3 months ago, it was more clear. That said, if we had been there 3 months ago and there wasn't a cost differential out of the gate, I don't think we'd be here seeing a recommendation to change to AHN. I haven't heard anything that would suggest that. So I'm not happy about the process, not necessarily from the administration standpoint, but just between the two bidders and how we got here.
I've been thinking, this is Carla. I don't have a hand. I didn't have time to do the add-ons. I've been processing what everybody said. And as someone who didn't grow up in this region, the relationship between these two entities drives me nuts. I find it very juvenile. And the fact that UPMC, what I've sort of seen from this discussion or through this process is that they didn't value our relationship enough to come with their best offer on the table. and that they waited to the last minute to match, I feel is kind of a slight to our taxpayers. That's just my perspective.
I'll share one thing, Dr. Meyer, that I had meant to say, and I think it's relevant here, and that is, and it's unfortunate because I encounter this in my own professional business at times, which is that these contracts are lost leaders typically. And that's what really is a bit aggravating here. So the question in a typical sort of contract, right? So in a capitalist economy, we're sort of asking them both to bid down to reduce their profit margin through competitive requests for proposal. And in fact, with this, unfortunately, what we're really asking is who's willing to lose the most money. And that leads to, unfortunately, I think the circumstances we're in now. I don't think either entity makes any money. And to the same point, the constant back and forth between these two institutions is, while perhaps annoying, we can't forget that it leads to, when done correctly, some very competitive pricing, that we have two entities trying to decide who's going to lose more money by doing business with us. So while the drama we could do without, the constant competitiveness leads to some advantages. And I think in case in point, with the low cost on the renewal, it's simply not realistic actually to look at what we were paying and have somebody else come in and think they're not losing money on this contract. Well, I do want to also add, I think in terms of quality of care, there has been a tremendous commitment from UPMC to our athletes and access to their best doctors over the years, for which I'm very grateful, and I've seen personally over the years, which is tremendous. I do hope, whichever way the vote goes, that we try to measure that, analyze that, look on that, and demand that as well, whichever vendor, as we go forward with this. Okay, do we have any other comments before we go to a vote? All right, Ms. Williams, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Dr. Mihalik,
I'm going to vote no.
Dr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. DiTullio, Mr. DiTullio,
Sorry, the mute's a little slow. No, I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Lyons,
No.
Mrs. Mizbach,
Yes.
Mr. Kashani,
Yes.
Mrs. Swope.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses, and 3 noes.
Motion carries. Contract with AHN is approved by the board.
Okay. 8.04 are administrative regulations for information. Dr. Miller.
We discussed this at the last meeting. Nothing has changed, so this will be the last meeting we have them on the agenda. No action is needed.
8.05 is an information item. We had a staff services committee meeting just prior to this board meeting. The topic for discussion was a hiring update.
Thank you, Matt. And Dr. Campbell, I know we blanked you in student services, but if you could pick up with item 9.03, one of the big 3 of our services.
All right. We have a motion to approve the food service management agreement with Sodexo with a guaranteed financial return of $178,470 for the fiscal year 2020-2021 as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I want to thank Ms. Bucknam for her partnering. I hate to use it as a verb, but if I'm going to use it as a verb, it's going to be with Diane Bucknam and the work that they've done with the administration, with the schools, with the staff in order to provide and increase the quality of their service over the years. So we are very lucky to have her and all her staff. Any other comments? We'll just do a voice vote. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, item 9.04 is a motion to approve the modification of the 2019-2020 academic calendar in light of the COVID-19 school closure by Governor Wolf.
Second.
Motion's been approved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I just want to thank the administration for attention to detail on this. The additional days, moving the last student day to Friday, May 29th, and using those additional days to plan for additional flexibility, continuity of learning over the summer, and for what may come in the fall, represents a strategic outlook that you have shown throughout this crisis, and we really appreciate it and are happy to support here.
Thank you.
I think we can do a voice vote on this. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.01 is just a simple reminder of a date, June 22nd, for the board and senior leadership team workshop. We'll move to reports. Ms. Misbach, you provided an A.W. Beatty report and budget narrative.
Yes, so that's the narrative is from the executive director, Eric Heasley, for Beatty, as pertaining to the proposed budget that we will be voting on. I think, Barb, is that in June that we will approve or not the budget. So that recommendation, so it's there for to be looked at. And then there was also so there's some numbers for enrollment next year of over 800, it's like 813 students that are enrolled for the next school year program at Beatty. And attached later was a video of that Eric Heasley provided of Beatty alumni who were first responders during this time throughout Pennsylvania. If you watch, it's really quite inspiring when you watch it. But it's the alumni who are out there as firefighters and EMS services. Nurses, doctors, so on, out on the say the front lines, working with all the individuals affected by the virus and not. So it's really nice. You should take a look at it if you haven't had a chance yet. That's it. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Any other reports from board members?
I'll just say that I know, and Dr. Miller loves when I say this, and Dr. Pasquinelli kind of smirks when I say this, but I think tonight was a good indication of decide. We debated a couple issues, we talked about them, and we voted, and we're moving on. And we're going on a path forward on everything that we need to go a path forward on. So I appreciate that, especially the fact that we can do it virtually, which is kind of different and interesting.
That's not smart, Mr. Vitolio. That's just the light beaming over my head.
I can tell that Dr. Miller's not happy about that statement at all.
I just want to add one thing on Chris's comment around Beatty. He has been working with us and the Slope too on Beatty awareness. One of our tasks this year was to meet with a group of students that attend Beatty to get their perspective on the experience and things that we can share with others. So we are doing that virtually. We got a virtual video conference set up with our students that attend Beatty that's going to happen late this week. Myself and one of the school counselors, Mr. Filipowski, is going to facilitate that. So we're looking forward to hear student perspective. And then again, that'll help drive us into some of our action plans we do just for student awareness moving forward.
By the way, Greg, I agree. I thought that was a healthy debate, and if we don't end this meeting soon,
I guess he ended it.
I'm gonna assume he meant to mute himself. I made the same mistake earlier. But Greg, I'll say one thing. So I agree, very healthy, and it continues to be so because of communication. Thanks for jumping back in, Mark. You didn't miss much. But it happens because do you want to continue your comments, Mark?
Turn the mic on.
We have you. Okay, I got a thumbs up. That'll do. But it happens because of the communication, and so especially with the logistics, changing platform tonight, the electronic meetings. Communication is an issue. So your efforts to communicate to the administration and to senior leadership of the board are as important as ever. And if you feel that some aspect of our meetings, logistics aren't working, definitely let us know, let Barb know, let myself know. Some of this, I'll be honest, we're making up a little bit on the fly, voice votes, roll call votes. I don't have a playbook. I just have a doodled copy of Dr. Miller's weekly update here. It's not actually a playbook. So feedback and guidance about how this is working for everyone is important. I see Mr. Kashani has raised his hand.
I just want to thank Ben for telling us about this Nod plugin to Chrome. It's really cool.
It is fantastic. Any other reports from the administration or board?
Need to do that.
We'll move to our second recognition of visitors. Ms. Williams, do we have anybody in the lobby virtually or IRL?
We do not, and there is nobody online who's indicated they want to address the board at this point.
Thank you, everyone. We'll adjourn this meeting to meet in executive session to discuss negotiation and safety and security matters. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.